Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. It is Wednesday, April 14th at 2:01 p.m. in Conference Room 325. First on the agenda, we have HR 113 requesting the William S. Richardson School of Law to establish the Burial Sites Working Group to examine the Burial Sites Program under the Department of Land and Natural Resources State Historic Preservation Division. We have a proposed HD1 requesting the establishment of a Burial Sites Working Group to review and recommend improvements to the Island Burial Council. First up, we have DLNR with comments.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers we have. Members, any questions? Rep. Ward.
What does Richardson have to say about this, Chair? Or did you get anything at all? I didn't see it in mine. This is for the Richardson School of Law to do something. Did they testify or submit anything?
No, the proposed HD1 is to change the measure.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 5, recognizing the importance of 21st century data governance for fact-based policymaking. First up, we have OHA in support.
Aloha, Vice Chair Masayoshi, Chair Nakashima, and members of the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. Aloha e ku'ulahui, aloha e na hoa hanau o moana nui akea. O wawo Shardy Freitas, he aho pueo kulekele au puni no ka Office of Hawaiian Affairs. E kua na wau ma komako o lalo ho'ike aha kau kana wai. Aloha, I'm Shardy Freitas, a public policy advocate with OHA. We stand on our written testimony. Additionally, I would also like to add that there continues to be similar data-related challenges that this resolution seeks to address, as we are seeing with the vaccination data. This resolution continues to be needed and will ensure that we not only have the data needed to respond and recover from COVID-19, but also plan for our future long-term infrastructure needs. Mahalo no ke kako o mai. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify. I will be available for questions. Ola.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Friends of Civil Rights in support. Amy, that's you if you'd like to testify.
Thank you. We stand in our testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have Papa Lakahi in support. Okay, not present. Next up, we have a number of individuals. Members, we have individuals all in support. One scheduled to testify, Tarina Fa'agao, in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Tarina Fa'agao, and today I testify in strong support of SCR 5. As a Native Hawaiian and Samoan, a first-generation college student from Waianae, and a soon-to-be law school graduate, my kuleana, or my responsibility, my privilege, the whole reason I went to law school, is to advocate on behalf of others in my community and to share and empower their stories that have been historically dismissed, ignored, or purposefully erased. Through law school, I've learned about the ways data and statistics also tell stories or narratives about our lives. These data-derived stories, whether or not they accurately reflect our reality, then inform and are legitimized through the state's laws and policies. Still today, data collected about us NHPIs tend to support colonial narratives and racist tropes that characterize us as coming from a place of deficit, difference, disparity, disadvantage, and dysfunctionality. These same types of stories and stereotypes were those weaponized by foreign Americans upon their arrival in Hawaii over 2 centuries ago to justify their dispossession, and displacement of Native Hawaiians. Incomplete or aggregate data and the flawed stories they tell directly impact and perpetuate harm against Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. This measure is a first necessary step toward better data that portray meaningful stories which accurately reflect NHPI lives. And without this measure, the state's data practices as is will continue to dismiss, ignore, and erase our issues, our stories, and our lives. I humbly ask that you pass this measure, and mahalo nui for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And just a reminder, testifiers, that there's a 2-minute limit to testimony. That's all the testifiers we have. No questions.
The Richardson Law School student, please, that just testified. Thank you for your motivational statement. That's very meaningful. The question I have is, how many areas of data collection are we missing now, singling out the Native Hawaiian community? Or is it across the board? Or is it just education or domestic violence, incarceration? What, if we put them all together, what are the numbers that should be impacted by the bill, should it, or this reso, should it pass? Which it likely will. Are you there?
Are you asking me? Excuse me, sorry.
I gave you a generic, the law school student.
Yes. I mean, this isn't a consistent ongoing problem. I don't have any numbers that I can direct you toward, but throughout history, the state has failed to collect important data about Native Hawaiians and other groups too. So this resolution is just one important step toward correcting the mistakes of the past, is what
of it and what it would impact how many people. Amy, do you have any insight on that in terms of what data should be called out of this or from it if it goes through? Or Ms. Freitas? No? Or Amy?
It's just too complicated to reply to because there are so many data sources. So it's too difficult to give you an answer at this time.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Freitas.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Do you mind repeating your question?
Basically, if and when, and obviously this will go through, the implementing this would mean how many areas of data collection need to open up the spout and let it be known. In other words, how poor is the state of the art of data collection that this should free the flow up from or for?
Okay, I think I heard you. I'm going to start by saying that that's the intent of this resolution, to bring together folks and see what that snapshot assessment would look like, identify the sources of data that we need across different state agencies. And so this resolution also recognizes that there is a need for that type of collaboration across state agencies. That's the whole idea of data governance.
Okay, that was equally difficult probably to hear as you're hearing now, but I'm just trying to say, the implementation of this, are they going to be able to deliver what otherwise is generic and what specific? And I know that's maybe going a little bit too far. So thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 25 SD1, requesting the Department of Public Safety to allow faith pods based on Kapua Aloha to be established within each correctional center. Members, we have a number of individuals and departments who submitted testimony in support. Just one individual, though, here to testify, Carrie Ann Shirota. Not present. We have no individuals here to testify, but lots of testimony in support. All right, let's move on to SCR 47 SD1, urging the Department of Veterans Affairs to recognize a presumptive service connection for chronically ill veterans who were stationed at Kunia Field on the island of Oahu. Submitting testimony in support, Matthew Lamb.
Aloha from Frisco, Texas. I'm here to support the Senate Resolution 47 SD1 today. I'm here as an advocate for all the other veterans, including myself, that served at the Kunia Tunnel and are sick, dealing with health issues, and trying to get support through the Department of Veterans Affairs to assist us from the environmental contamination and other issues that were taking place there for many years. And I'm here to answer any questions if anybody has any also.
Questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 55 SD1 HD1, urging the Department of Land and Natural Resources to adopt administrative rules to streamline the process for allowing traditional Hawaiian farming systems on conservation land. One testifier here today, Deal and all with comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mataoshi, and committee members Sam Lemo for Suzanne Case, DLNR. You see our comments seeking with some amendment language.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, testifiers, if you could mute your microphones after you're done testifying. Thank you. We'll on to SCR 103 SD1, urging the United States military to clean up munitions and explosives of concern in Hawaii under the Military Munitions Response Program. Two testimonies in support submitted and one in opposition, but no one here to testify today. Is there anyone in the audience here that would like to testify, that submit testimony on this issue on SCR 103? Seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 164, SD1, HD1. The United States Senate and President of the United States to enact the Protecting the Right to Organize Act as expeditiously as possible. First up, we have the LGBT caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Michael Galoyu on behalf of the LGBT caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We stand in full support of this resolution, and we are proud to stand with our allies in the labor community to make sure that everybody has the right to organize. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to you passing this resolution out. Mahalo.
We have UPW in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Dan Kochi for UPW. Thank you guys for hearing this resolution. We'll stand in our written testimony in strong support and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next up, Afl-Cio in support. Anyone from Afl-Cio here?
Oh, Dion Dizan with the Hawaii State Afl-Cio. Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for scheduling this for a hearing. We stand on our testimony submitted in support, and I'll be available for questions. Aloha.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 169, SD1, HD1, urging the governor to create a task force to develop recommendations on the roles and responsibilities of the Department of the Attorney General and law enforcement in enforcing emergency proclamations to mitigate the further spread of the coronavirus disease 2019 in Hawaii. First up, we have the Attorney General's office with comments.
Good afternoon, Chair. Lance Goto with Department. We'll stand on our testimony, just offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll also note that there are two individuals who submitted testimony in opposition to this measure. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 171, urging all law enforcement officers and prosecuting attorneys in the state to vigorously enforce and prosecute offenses committed against essential workers while on the job. First up, we have Afl-Cio in support.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, Dion Dizan with the Hawaii State Afl-Cio. Standing on our testimony submitted in support, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Next up, UPW in support.
Good afternoon again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Dan Kochi for UPW. Will stand on our written testimony in support as well, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And last up, we have IATSE Local 665 in support. Okay, not present. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 190 SD1 HD1, convening a working group to update plans for the Mauna, Makapuu, Scenic, Byway, and Consolidate management along the Kaivi Coast Scenic Shoreline. First up, we have DLNR in support.
Kurt Cottrell, Administrator, Division of State Parks. Yeah, we stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up, Department of Transportation in support.
Good afternoon, Lena Rocky Regan for the State Department of Transportation. We stand on a written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 207, submitting to the Legislature of the State of Hawaii submitting to the Legislature of the State of Hawaii for review and approval of action taken by the Board of Land and Natural Resources on a land exchange between the State of Hawaii and Parker Land Trust. We have DLNR first up in support.
afternoon, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee. Russell Tsuji for the department. Will stand in support of this resolution that was approved by the land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions on this? Yep, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 220 SD1, recognizing the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the United States of America and the Republic of the Philippines. First up, we have Amy Agbayani in support.
Thank you very much, Chair, Vice Chair. We stand on our written testimony.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have a name I'm going to mispronounce, Knights of Rizal Chapter and University of the Philippines Alumni Association in support.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this opportunity to express our support, and we stand on our written testimony in support of SCR 220.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Yep, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 235, requesting the Department of Transportation to evaluate traffic congestion, highway flooding, and road safety issues on Hawaii Island. We have one testifier today, Department of Transportation in support.
Good afternoon again, Lena Rocky-Regan from the State Department of Transportation. We stand on a written testimony in support and offer comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Yep, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 246 SD1, requesting that a working group be convened to develop recommendations for implementing the Revitalizing Economy and Agriculture Leadership Initiative. First up, we have Hawaii Department of Agriculture with comments.
Bilishma Bukro Geyser on behalf of the department. We stand on our written testimony. We appreciate the intent of the measure. However, we question our ability to participate and perform as expected due to the proposed loss of positions and funding currently being debated in the legislature. Mahalo, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee.
Thank you. Next up, we have University of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Jeff Goodwin with College of Tropical Agriculture at UH Manoa. And we support the resolution and stand on our submitted testimony. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Last up, we have DHHL with comments.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Nakashima, members of the committee. We stand on our testimony with comments and are open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Rep Ward.
Was the Department of Agriculture here?
Yes. Representative.
Shouldn't, if we're going to talk about revitalization of agriculture and the economy, have some farmers or some practicing business persons in this? I see they're usually government chairs and other non-economic based, what would you call it, private sector stuff. Shouldn't there be more private sector people in this, Rezo? Rather than chairs of departments and boards? That's an open question. I mean, not to agree or disagree, but if you're going to do some economic revitalization, you would think you'd have some big players or at least some farmers that are knowledgeable to give non-farmers some insight on how to revitalize their industry. That could either be a question or a rhetorical comment, depending on if you want to respond.
Representative Ward, I would defer to the introducer of this measure about the intent, but I believe that we were included because we do deal directly with the stakeholder groups, and I think the agencies would bring knowledge of existing policy, but that does not preclude stakeholder input. I anticipate that the meetings would probably be open or available. Mahalo.
Thank you. I may ask the chair to put that in the committee report, but that'll be later. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? If not, I have one for DHHL.
Yes, Chair. Vice Chair.
I've noticed that the Sovereign Council of Hawaiian Homestead Associations is included in this working group. What percentage of homesteads does that organization represent? Do you happen to know?
We're actually in the process of quantifying that, but at this point, it's less than 50%.
Okay. And do you know how many agricultural homesteads that it represents? I'm just wondering if we're including this organization in there, if that is an organization representative of the homesteaders, or if certain ones are going to be left out by including this and not other groups as well.
There will be homestead farmer type groups that are not part of the show that will not be represented.
Okay. Do you have any proposal of what kinds of groups should be in here so that homesteaders will have a voice in this process?
I think if there's a amendment to be made, I think we would do best to have the department maybe name someone from the Shaw and someone who is not represented by the Shaw, so that we have equal representation.
Okay. In your opinion, for this particular working group, should homesteaders be represented in this working group, or would it be beneficial to have them in there, or are they not needed for this purpose?
I think it would be beneficial. The question has always been from our beneficiaries is where are the resources going to come from for assistance with implementing, expanding efforts in agriculture on our lands. And then of course we have lands that don't have water. So how do we get infrastructure to our lands to where beneficiaries who are on the wait list and actually have leases that are in areas where we don't have water would have access to additional infrastructure.
Okay, so your proposal to represent the other 50+% of homesteaders that are not represented by the Shaw is for DHHL to select another representative that might represent those others, or is that practical?
I think that is more fair and more representative of the entire beneficiary population.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to SCR 247 ST1, requesting that a working group be convened to develop recommendations to facilitate homestead agricultural demonstration projects in the state. First up, we have Hawaii Department of Agriculture with comments.
Aloha, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Felishimu Bukuro Geyser on behalf of the department. We stand on our written testimony offering written comments. And we envision our potential contribution to this effort as a technical disease and pest advisor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have DHHL with comments.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, Chair Nakashima, and members of the committee. We submit our testimony and stand on our comments. I would just like to highlight that if we had to move forward with one of these two resolutions, we would prefer SCR 246 SD1.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to SCR 165 SD1. Members, we have no testifiers here to comment on that measure, so we will recess for decision making. Recess. Reconvening the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. Still Wednesday, April 14th in the conference room 325. First up, we've got HR 113. We've got a proposed HD1 that has been circulated. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass it as the HD1. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair. As ordered.
HR 113. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ichiyama. Aye. Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Lopresti. Excused. Representative Lowen.
Aye.
Representative McKelvey.
Aye.
Representative Nakamura.
Aye.
Representative Takumi.
Aye.
Representative Todd. Excused. Representative Tokioka. Excused. And Representative Ward.
Aye.
Measure passes.
Okay, thank you, members. Next up is SCR 5, recognizing the importance of 21st century data governance for fact-based policymaking. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Any comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 5, recommendations to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Are there any noes? Any reservations? Motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 25 SD1, requesting the Department of Public Safety to allow faith pods based on Kapu Aloha to be established within each correctional center. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Any comments? Okay, see none. Chair, as is.
SCR 25 SD1, your recommendations to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Are there any noes? Any reservations? Chair, motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 47 SD1, urging the Department of Veterans Affairs to recognize a presumptive service connection for chronically ill veterans who are stationed at Kunia Field on the island of Oahu. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as is.
SCR 47 SD1, recommendations to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 55 SD1 HD1, urging the Department of Land and Natural Resources to adopt administrative rules to streamline the process for allowing traditional Hawaiian farming systems on conservation land. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none. Chair, as is.
SCR 55 SD1 HD1, recommendations to pass unamended, knowing the excused absences of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have SCR 103 SD1, urging the United States military to clean up munitions and explosives of concern in Hawaii under the Military Munitions Response Program. We have a number of amendments coming from the resolution's originator. First, we'll be changing the title to requesting the United States military to return unused land that becomes available at Bellows Air Force Station to the state of Hawaii. This is focusing in a little bit more on the Bellows Air Force Station itself. We'll be removing language on the Military Munitions Response Program and inserting language requesting that the return of the unused land at Bellows Air Force Base to the state of Hawaii for community use after the munitions are removed, and also some technical non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions? Seeing none, as amended.
SCR 103 SD1, recommendations to pass with amendments, knowing the excused absence of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Are there any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, SCR 164 SD1 HD1, urging the United States Senate and President of the United States to enact the Protecting the Right to Organize Act as expeditiously as possible. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this as is. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, as is.
SCR 164 SD1, HD1. The recommendations passed unamended, knowing the excused absence of Representative Lepresti Todd and Tokyo Card. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. In light of the testimony and also in light of the bills going through that are still alive that do allow for petty misdemeanors and infractions for COVID-related violations, we will be deferring SCR 169 SD1 HD1. For SCR 171, urging all law enforcement officers and prosecuting attorneys in the state of Hawaii, in the state to vigorously enforce and prosecute offenses committed against essential workers while on the job. Vice Chair's recommendation is to adopt the proposed amendment by the Afl-Cio to adopt the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, their definition of essential workers to better define and enumerate what is considered an essential worker for the purposes of this resolution. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair as amended.
SCR 171, recommendations pass with amendments. No excuse absence of Representative Lepresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Are there any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 190, SD1, HD1, convening a working group to update plans for the Mauna Loa, Makapuu Scenic Byway and Consolidate management along the Kaivi Coast Scenic Shoreline. We have a number of amendments to this resolution. We will be adding the chair of the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board to the list of people that will receive certified copies of the resolution. We will be slightly expanding the area covered by the resolution, and we will be making technical non-substantive amendments for the purposes of clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair as amended.
SCR 190, SD1, HD1, recommendation to pass with amendments. No excuse absent of Representative Lepresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 207, submitting to the Legislature of the State of Hawaii for review and approval of action taken by the Board of Land and Natural Resources on a land exchange between the State of Hawaii and Parker Land Trust. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, any comments? Seeing none, Chair as is.
SCR 207, recommendation is to pass unamended. No excuse absence of Representative Lepresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 220, SD1, recognizing the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the United States of America and the Republic of the Philippines. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, as is.
SCR 220, SD1, recommendation is to pass unamended. No excuse absence of Representative Lepresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 235 SD1, requesting the Department of Transportation to evaluate traffic congestion, highway flooding, and road safety issues on Hawaii Island. Vice Chair's recommendation is to pass this resolution as is. Members, any comments? Okay, Chair, as is.
SCR 235 SD1, recommendation is to pass unamended. No excuse absence of Representative Lepresti, Chris, Todd, and Tokioka. Any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have SCR 246 SD1, requesting that a working group be convened to develop recommendations for implementing the Revitalizing Economy and Agriculture Leadership Initiative. Members, we were going to be amending this to add another representative to the group nominated by DHHL to represent the homestead, the agricultural homestead members, not part of the SHA. Members, any questions or comments?
Comment,
Report.
Chair. I think that's well taken. That balances and increases the participation of homesteads. The only difficulty I see here is that we're talking about revitalizing the economy, and we've got no movers and shakers of the economy, i.e. the entrepreneurs. I find that a rather large gap in the logic. If you want to do something economic, you have economists. If you have something medical, you bring doctors in. If you have something dental, you bring dentists in. you don't have the actual guys that are going to be the ones who are going to do this and make it successful. Because of that, I'm going to have reservations for now.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair will note that the Director of Business, Economic Development and Tourism is part of this as well, and the Board of Agriculture is there as well.
But those are bureaucrats, if I could be so crass. They're not private sector.
Oh, fair enough, point taken. Any other comments? Okay, if not, Chair, as amended.
SCR 246 SD1, recommendations passed with amendments noting the excused absence of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka, and the reservation of Representative Ward. Any other noes or reservations? Seeing none, motion is passed.
Thank you, members. We will be deferring SCR 247 SD1 in light of the overlap with SCR 246 SD1. Lastly, on the agenda, we have SCR 165 SD1, requesting the United States Congress to consent to the enactment of Act 80, Session Laws of Hawaii 2017. Members, we're going to have two votes here. The first is to reconsider this, and then the second will be to amend it to take out a whereas provision relating to marriage to prevent a future future possible federal conflict if the Native Hawaiian population decides to attempt to gain recognition as a federal Indian tribe or the like. So we'll be taking two votes. The first, I believe, is to reconsider. Should be two.
Yeah.
Chair, which line in the reso are you referring to?
Sorry, I'll take a brief recess. Chairing Hawaiian Affairs, still April 14th in conference room 325. Motion to reconsider, SCR 165 SD1, requesting the United States Congress to consent to the enactment of Act 80, Session Laws of Hawaii 2017. Chair, with the vote.
Okay, SCR 165 SD1, the committee is reconsidering its previous decision on the measure. Knowing the excused absence of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka, are there any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll be considering amendments to SCR 165 SD1. Again, the changes will be on page 1 of the resolution to delete lines 16 through 19. It's the whereas provision relating to a significant number of marriages for possible federal conflicts in the future. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Chair, as amended.
SCR 165 SD1, recommendation is to pass with amendments knowing the excused absence of Representative Lopresti, Todd, and Tokioka. Are there any noes? Any reservations? Motion is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Members, we are adjourned.